Okay, I think we are ready to begin. Hi everyone, I'm Nimisha. I am a software engineer living in Seattle, and I am really interested in climate technology, and I'm a Wildtype for a while. So I recently read this book, Clean Meat. In fact, a few friends and I, we all read it together. And we learned about cultivated meat in that book, and precision fermentation, and all these alternative proteins. And that, until then, we thought it was more like science fiction. But we realized after reading this book that it's reality, and it's actually already happening. It's just not at scale yet. So that inspired us to host this event. And I just want to say a big thank you to Laura and Lal, who basically run this place and let us host this event here. And with that, I want to let Laura start with a brief introduction about the ClimateHub.
Hi everyone, who is here for the first time? Oh wow, nice. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Laura. I'm Ops lead for 90 on this space. The ClimateHub is a partnership between Youth of Commotion Labs, who just recruited their first team for incubator cohort that will be starting in this floor in July. Virtulab, a non-profit that will be having some accelerator operations here on the floor, and 90 private business that is offering all these events and networking in climate and some co-working space on over probably 2/3 of the floor. And we opened our first location a little over a year ago in San Francisco. We are looking at New York City, Boston, Chicago in the future. And what we do is really connecting innovators with founders, investors, engineers, people in research who want to drive climate action. And it's all happening here in person throughout all these events programmation. We have lots of lunches by sectors. We have members lunches, like some events that are for members only, and some events so that anyone can join the movement and know about what we're doing here and learn more about how we can all take part into climate action. So it's really nice to see a lot of new faces. There's also a few members, so don't hesitate to ask around and meet with them and ask them what it's like to be a member. And if you have any questions, come see me. That was like the very brief version of what we do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura.
Excited to be here.
Vikas is the other moderator. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Vikas. So my quick background is I left my job. I was a software engineer at Google. I wanted to work on alt protein full time. So I've been doing that for the past 2 months. And now I'm here moderating for all these amazing panelists. Thank you for letting me moderate for you all, and I'll pass it back to Nimisha.
Okay. To warm up, let's do a couple of polls with the audience. I hope you'll indulge me on this. So if you've tried a plant-based meat product in the last 1 month, raise your hand. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, if you think that climate change makes a difference in the way you make your food choices, raise your hand.
Wow.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Okay, with that, I'll let Vikas kick us off with the first round of questions.
Yeah, so I want to begin with a set of introductions for our awesome panelists here. So panelists, if you could please just share your name and a brief description of your work. So I want to keep it to around 45 seconds because we have a lot of questions to go through. So I want to start off with Christie here, who is the CEO of Rebellyous Foods.
Hi everyone, my name is Christie Lagally. I'm the founder and CEO of Rebellyous Foods. We are located right here in the Seattle area. We make plant-based chicken products for the public school systems, cafeterias. We focus on price parity with animal meat, and we do that by developing new food processing technologies to produce meat, plant-based meat at scale of the scale and the price of animal-based meat. So we essentially design new production equipment so that we can put that into practice and make plant-based meat faster.
Very cool. So next we have Ash. Ash is the founder of Ojaswe.
Hi everyone, my name is Ash. I use she/her pronouns. I'm a plant-based chef and the founder of Ojaswe, We're a regenerative food company also based here in Seattle, and we essentially make nutrient-dense, regeneratively sourced, clean label, pantry staples and snacks that fit into busy lifestyles. I started the company after I worked on a regenerative farm for a hot minute. There's a reason I'm not a farmer, but I do believe that everyone has a strong role to play in the food system.
Great. So next we have Claire. Claire is the senior scientist at the Good Food Institute. I've put their URL on the board there too, so go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Claire Bomkamp. I'm from the Good Food Institute. We're a nonprofit that basically does all things all proteins. So we're kind of like a hub. We don't make products. We don't do wet lab work or anything like that. I focus on cultivated meat and seafood on our science and technology team, and I'm basically here because I started out in academia doing basically cell biology, but wanted to have something that had a little bit more of a direct connection to things like climate change and biodiversity, and sort of like Nimisha said, realized, heard about cultivated meat, realized it wasn't science fiction, and was like, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. So now I'm here.
Very cool. So now we have Cindy, who's the Associate Director of Engineering at Wildtype.
Hi everyone, I'm Cindy Hoppe. I'm with Wildtype Foods. We're based in San Francisco. I reside up here in the Seattle area. I am a chemical engineer by trade, worked for over 10 years in the precision fermentation alt protein industry prior to joining Wildtype Foods. A consultant friend of mine introduced me to Wildtype Foods, and I saw an opportunity to use my skill set to help a company that was commercializing cultivated seafood and was going to change the world.
Great, and finally we have Nicki. Nicki is the founder of Here There Communications and the former VP of Corporate Affairs at Perfect Day.
Hi, it's so great to be here. I'm Nicki. I'm a dietitian by training, but I've worked in communications for a long time. And so really all of my work has been, I think, between the sort of intersection of food and science, really with sort of a focus on category creating companies. So I used to be the chief comms officer at Chobani, then went to work for a plant-based yogurt, and then went to Perfect Day in the precision fermentation dairy space. So really have kind of seen all segments of that consumer interested landscape. And at Perfect Day helped to found the first trade association for precision fermentation, and now run a communications agency really focused on food, nutrition, and technology.
Thank you so much, Nicki. So thanks for the introduction, all of our panelists. So we've known for a long time you can grow beer with yeast and cheese with microbes, but can we grow meat and dairy proteins the same way from cells without animals is the next question. So we had a nice lead up with some of our panelists talking about cultivated meat and precision fermentation. We've already seen some plant-based foods in the aisle today, but what are cultivated meats and precision fermented proteins? Some of our panelists may not even know, so I want to start with Cindy. Cindy, could you tell us what cultivated meat is and how it's different from the traditional meats we see in supermarkets?
Sure. Unlike plant-based meat, cultivated meat is real meat grown from cells. At Wildtype, we take salmon cells that were originally harvested from one single juvenile salmon years ago, and we propagate those cells and put them into a food-safe environment in a bioreactor similar to a fermentation tank that you would brew beer in. And we grow those cells by feeding them plant-based mixture of amino acids, sugars, and other nutrients that help them grow in an environment that's not inside of a fish, but otherwise they're the exact same cells. We take those cells and put them into a plant-based scaffold to give them the taste or the texture and feel of real meat with the same nutrition and taste profile that you would experience eating real salmon.
Isn't that just crazy, honestly? So next I want to move on to Nicki. Nicki talked about precision fermentation here. So I want to ask Nicki, what exactly is precision fermentation? And as a follow-up, I know Nicki worked at Perfect Day. So Perfect Day makes precision fermented whey protein. So I want to know how is that whey protein different from the whey protein we find in supermarkets, and what kind of product use cases does that have?
Good questions. So I think maybe just to back up in this wild world of food technology, Cindy gave a really great explanation about cultivated meat, and really what we're talking about with these kinds of technologies is a field called cellular agriculture, and within there we have cultivated meat, we have something called micellular fermentation, and then we have precision fermentation. And precision fermentation is the use of genetically engineered organisms. So you can use yeast, fungi, bacteria, and you basically give them a special little code so that they can make molecules of interest. You can make proteins, you can make fats, you can make enzymes, flavors. It's really limitless, and it's already it's been used for over 50 years. So all insulin is made with this technology. Lots of products, vitamins, nutraceuticals. It's really all over the value chain, and sort of recently, within the last 10 years, there's a special application within making high-value food products like proteins. And the neat thing about this is the proteins that are made, so whey protein, is identical to the protein that comes from an animal. So there's really a lot of taste benefits, there's a lot of texture benefits, you don't have off notes from plant-based proteins, you don't have to add sugar or colors or flavors, it's a pure protein. And it performs just like an animal protein with far fewer resources, so more sustainable.
So cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And speaking of sustainability, let's actually move on to talk about the climate. Just a grounding fact, animal agriculture is responsible for 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and is the leading cause of deforestation worldwide. So I want to ask this question. So do plant-based, precision fermented and cultivated proteins actually reduce climate impact compared to conventional animal agriculture? So I want to start with Christie for this one. Christie, are plant-based meats like those made by Rebellyous better for the environment than traditional meats? Why or why not?
1 minute.
1 minute, yeah. So yes, they are. Some quick numbers. It usually takes about 68 calories of some sort of plant to feed a chicken in order to get the same amount of protein out. That number is close to about 20 or 25 for beef or cattle. I think it's close to 40 for lamb. It's basically just the most inefficient use of our resources to actually feed animals and then slaughter them and then harvest them for the limited amount of protein they have in their bodies. So absolutely, if we're talking about land use, if we're talking about limited water in terms of raising some sort of protein product, the use of animals is quite literally the most inefficient way we could do it.
Awesome, yeah. Ash, you mentioned you have a background in regenerative farming and things like that. So how do you think about environmental benefits when you're sourcing ingredients for Ojaswe?
Oh my gosh. I think, also 1 minute?
Yeah. Sorry.
No problem. I'm just mostly kidding. I think for us, at Ojaswe, when we think about sourcing, we're thinking about it through the lens of two key lenses. One is regenerative agriculture, as in, are the farms we're sourcing from, are the ingredients we are sourcing, are they regenerating the land and restoring the land? Just for a quick check, how many people in the audience are familiar with regenerative agriculture as a term? Okay, that's far more than I expected, and far more than several people that I talk to on a daily basis. So awesome. I won't go into too much detail there, but part of it is land use, right? Like Christie just mentioned, it is a more efficient way of using the land when you're restoring the soil. The second lens that we look at, is the lens of regional food systems, as in, what are we growing regionally that we can source from? So for us at Ojaswe, my background is in consumer products. Prior to doing what I do now, I used to launch really big name brands for really large food companies. And so I went through COVID in that role, and I saw how fragile our food system was, right? So I think for me, removing that fragility, and for Ojaswe, removing that fragility or helping bolster our existing supply, even in a place like the Pacific Northwest, where we do have a shorter growing season, there are so many amazing farmers growing a wide range of crops, including diaspora crops. So it's really, it's been a valuable lesson to learn that environmental sustainability can also look like regional food systems resilience.
Thanks, yeah. So we talked about plants, and we know plants are more efficient, right? But let's move on to cultivated meat. So Claire, based on Good Food Institute's life cycle analysis, how does cultivated meat meat's climate impact compared to that of traditional meats?
Okay, this is going to be a little bit more complicated than Christie's answer. It's still good. But the sort of top line result is if you cultivate meat using decarbonized energy sources, so things like solar and wind, the climate impact is fairly comparable to conventional chicken, and it's a lot better than pork and a whole lot better than beef. So that's kind of our baseline. So why do I mention the energy source? Turns out that's a big thing that matters. So the life cycle assessment also included several different scenarios for how meat could be cultivated. And if you use a conventional energy mix from whenever the study was done, which I think was like 2019 or so, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. It's still a whole lot better than beef, but it's kind of, a little bit higher than it would be with the renewable sources. So what I take from that is, it's not so important that we look at these top line numbers, but for an industry that's at such an early stage like cultivated meat, those numbers of course are important for answering, is this worth pursuing? Is it worth putting more effort into? But what's actually more interesting to me is we can identify the kind of biggest levers to pull, where if we change one variable or another in the production process, is that going to make a big difference to the climate impact? So the big outcome from that, in my mind, is not this is the percentage by which cultivated meat is going to be better. We don't know what that's going to be. It's going to depend on a lot of decisions that a lot of people are going to make. But what we learned from that study is when we're talking about developing cultivated meat as an industry, it's really critical that we be doing that with an eye to kind of these adjacent technologies. And I'm actually really optimistic about this because there's a lot that's happening in the development of things like solar and wind power. So it seems, that's a thing we can do to make sure that as we're developing cultivated meat, we're making sure that it's using decarbonized energy sources. It's better, but it depends how we make it.
Perfect. I think that makes sense because as we move towards abundance of clean energy, we'll see these factors get better for all sectors. That makes sense. Cindy, so at Wildtype you work on cultivated fish. How are cultivated fish products better for the environment?
Our products are completely free of microplastics, parasites, and all of the other problems that come along with real seafood. But what gets me really the most excited about our process is that the carbon footprint of our process is an order of magnitude lower than the carbon footprint of fishing and especially salmon farming. It's the diesel that is burned to operate the ships, and the emissions that go into the environment from fish farms, and also the distribution, right? If anybody enjoys sushi, sushi grade fish is flown all over the world to Japan and back most often to get to our tables. So we're eliminating all of that with our process.
That's a really impressive number. Nicki, so what kind of animal products can we expect precision fermented proteins to replace, and why is it beneficial to replace those proteins?
I mean, it's being used as technology by all kinds of early stage companies trying to replace commodity conventional proteins. So I've spoken a little bit about whey protein, which was what Perfect Day is focused on. There's companies trying to make egg proteins. There's companies trying to replace proteins found in infant formula. So really the applications are limitless, right? It's really about innovation and technology and being able to scale that. And it extends far beyond protein too. There's companies that are trying to make lipids, which I'm really excited about. I mean, better tasting fats, not from animals, is really exciting. And the reason why people want these products, right, is because they actually perform like animal products. It's not an alternative. And so there's so much, and if you open, the average consumer's fridge, unless you're vegan or vegetarian, but if you live in a family household with lots of diverse diets, you're gonna usually see 3 or 4 kinds of milk. I have 3 kinds of milk in my fridge, right? And so it's a way that we can actually offer products that meet a variety of tastes and needs.
Thank you so much. So a lot of these products seem a little crazy to me. We have here price parity on plant-based foods. We have culturally based plant-based foods. We have cultivated meat, and we have precision fermented protein. So I want to talk a little about the technical side of this and all the challenges that come with it. So over a decade ago, the first cultivated beef burger came at a price of over $300,000, making food-grade proteins from microbes was a pipe dream, and plant-based meats didn't taste nearly as good. So today, alternative protein companies have slashed production costs thanks to cheaper production methods. So what are the biggest hurdles the industry still faces, technical or otherwise, and how close are we to overcoming them? So here I want to start actually with Cindy. So can you give us an overview of the process to create cultivated seafood, since that's still a little unclear to me? I know you mentioned it briefly, so maybe you can just touch on it. And then as a follow-up, what are the biggest technical barriers Wildtype and other cultivated companies face today, and how can we overcome those things?
Sure, I mentioned the large-scale bioreactors.
You can take 2 minutes for this, so don't feel rushed.
Yeah.
The large-scale bioreactors, which look like brewery tanks, are where we grow the salmon cells. Once we are finished growing the cells in those tanks, we take the cells out of those tanks, concentrate them down, remove the water, and then add them to a plant-based scaffold. So we have a bunch of plant-based ingredients that go into that part of the process before it ends up looking like a salmon fillet. The biggest technical challenge that we have is really around that equipment, around those bioreactors. Bioreactors have been used for decades, as was mentioned in the pharmaceutical industry, to grow, to produce drugs and to grow cells to produce drugs. So it's a very similar process in that regard. So we are trying to find a balance between the very, very extraordinarily expensive equipment that is involved in the pharmaceutical industry to do just that, and the very inexpensive equipment that is used in breweries. We're kind of in the middle of those two extremes, and we're trying to figure out how to make that cost effective. So that is probably our biggest challenge. There are not a lot of equipment suppliers out there who know how to do that and to produce that equipment effectively, cost effectively.
Cool, that's good to know. And I want to sort of jump off that with my next question to Claire. So Claire, what is the role of nonprofits like GFI in addressing the technical challenges that Cindy just talked about, actually? And are we seeing enough academic and public sector support to really scale?
So in terms of the things that nonprofits can do, I think there's a lot, but maybe a couple that I would highlight are kind of coordinating research directions and getting governments on board. So one thing we do a lot of at GFI is I feel like we're in kind of a unique position of being able to take a fairly bird's eye view of the industry. We're not kind of looking at it from the perspective of a particular lab or a particular company trying to get their product to market. We're able to kind of look at things very broadly, and we have less technical detail into a lot of the kind of exactly what's going on in the bioreactors, but we're able to kind of look at the forest and make some recommendations for where things should go, and in some cases what that ends up meaning is that we actually fund research ourselves, so we have a small research grant program. And one thing that I've been really impressed with what's come out of that program is not so much the research itself that gets funded. That's great, obviously. There's very important technical milestones that people have been able to hit because of that. But I think more importantly is the people who get involved through that program then go on to get other people involved and form consortia and do all these things and apply for bigger and better funding elsewhere. And that kind of really sets the groundwork for other things that we're not directly involved in, but we're sort of acting as a little bit of a catalyst at that very early stage. And the other thing I would add is just how we are not going to be funding alt protein research at the level that it needs to be funded. Like, that is just not our role. We don't have the infrastructure to support like a multi-billion-dollar grant funding process. Like, we don't want that. But what we do want is for governments to be stepping in and funding alt protein research or research that's relevant to alt proteins. And so what we can do is kind of set the groundwork with our little tiny bitty seed of funding, and then that can go forward and catalyze a lot more down the road.
Awesome. So it seems like you have a broader view, and Cindy is working more on a specific part. I guess that's sort of the difference here, right? I want to move to some of the plant-based folks here. Sorry, I messed up the order a little. So Christie is going to go next, and then it'll be you, Ash. So And then just because we're running a little late on time, we'll have to go through to the next section, unfortunately. So, Christie, while price parity is something cultivated meat is still working towards, Rebellyous Foods seems to be one of the few plant-based meats that's able to be cost competitive with traditional meats, which I generally haven't seen many other plant-based meats do that. So what's the hardest part of scaling production while keeping costs low for plant-based meat? And what infrastructure investments are most important for scaling?
Yeah, you kind of answered the question in the question, which is that infrastructure is what's needed to make plant-based meat at a cost parity product to animal meat. And that's exactly what we've done at Rebellyous Foods. So 8 years ago now, I started the company as Seattle Food Tech, and we developed food processing equipment that was specific to plant-based meat production. We're now in the process of putting that in place. It is what brings us the enough margin in order to offer plant-based meat, plant-based chicken to the USDA National School Lunch Program. We serve over 7,000 schools nationally. Some of the most economically disadvantaged schools in the country are serving Rebellious's products because they can also get those products reimbursed by the USDA. And that's really important because everybody should have access to climate-friendly foods.
Oh, yeah.
So, which time do you have left?
That's good. So I want to move on to Ash next. So I don't know if this is, I don't know if this is going to be a similar answer, infrastructure issue for you, but I'm curious, how does sourcing, you have a pretty unique taste on plant-based proteins because you're focusing on very culturally relevant proteins. So I'm curious, is there any unique scale-up challenge that Christie may not encounter, where you would have to encounter?
Yeah, great question. I think one thread that you will hear throughout is the same for regenerative food as well, infrastructure. In order to create a different food system, we need different infrastructure than what already exists. Our existing infrastructure serves a very specific purpose, and oftentimes it is massive nutrient deficient food at scale. For us with regenerative, the challenge is less with culturally relevant sourcing and much more because we are focused on that dual approach of regenerative and regional. So operational challenges and infrastructure challenges, they're our primary challenges right now. I think financial is the other unique one with, I'm sure, all kinds of consumer food products, but for the products we make, there are immediate comparisons, right? Like, so if we make a pancake mix right now, most box pancake mixes, they're about $6 or less. So for us, for regenerative brands like us or alternative protein sources, we are hitting that price parity is another big one because we're not, we're compared to a different standard, although our sourcing practices are valuing vastly different things than a global large-scale manufacturer would.
Cool. So it seems like we're not doing too horribly on time, so I do want to pass it to Nicki too to get her opinion here too. Is infrastructure also the biggest challenge on the fermentation side? Why isn't precision fermented whey or egg protein already widespread? Why can't I go and buy that stuff?
I wouldn't say it's the biggest challenge. There's just challenges galore in this space. It's scaling, but I think it is a large challenge, right? It's infrastructure, and so some of that is to do with fundraising, which I'm sure that we'll talk about, right? It's a big topic, but some of it's also just demand, right? And the ability and the equipment to be able to make these products. There are no existing factories that you can just go into and give somebody your formulation and expect them to make it. You either have to build it yourself or ask a co-manufacturer to retrofit all their equipment. So it's expensive and it takes time. And so it'll happen, right? But it is gonna take time, is having the right facilities to actually be able to make these products at scale and then having the demand to justify making them. And it affects everything, not just price, but even some of the sustainability metrics we were hearing about in LCAs, all those numbers get better at scale, right?
Yeah, awesome. So I want to move on to a pretty interesting topic, actually suggested by one of our panelists, Claire. So speaking of actually creating the demand and doing stuff at scale, one of the things Claire mentioned were hybrid products. So combining plant-based meat with cultivated meat, and whether that offers sort of a middle path to scale and taste. So Claire, I've heard from skeptics that mixing plant-based foods with cultivated meats won't significantly improve taste. What do you feel is the role of hybrids on the way to fully cultivated meat?
Yeah, so I mean, the way I look at hybrids is we divide this into different types of alternative protein production. So, oh, you're working on plant-based, we're working on cultivated, you're working on fermentation. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make products that are just as tasty and just as affordable, or maybe even better than conventional animal products. And like, that is the thing. So we don't need to necessarily limit ourselves to, oh, I'm only going to use this one production technology to get to that particular goal. Maybe if we take some of what's good about this technology, some of what's good about that technology, we can get something that is much easier to get to that goal. So to way overgeneralize things, I would say that cultivated meat might have a little bit of an easier time getting to taste parity because it is literally animal cells, and plant-based might have an easier time getting to price parity because you don't have to cultivate animal cells. So if we can get a formulation where you add 20% animal cells to an otherwise plant-based product and that makes it taste better, then absolutely, why would you not do that? You kind of get to win on both taste and price. And as to the skeptics who say, well, I don't know, you gotta mix the things together and taste it. And it might not be the answer for every single product, but I think it's going to be a big part of how we get certainly the future of cultivated meat, because the price thing is not easy.
Yeah. So let's move on to this question that probably is on everyone's minds about the timeline and the market share. So just like advancements in solar energy and AI, progress usually isn't linear, it's exponential. It's driven by breakthroughs across biology, engineering, and energy. So let's talk about innovation. When will we see cultivated meat, precision fermented alternatives, and plant-based meats capture larger market shares? So I want to stay with Claire for this. We've heard time and time again that cultivated meat is only 5 years away, but we have yet to see a fully cultivated product in stores. So what scientific and regulatory milestones should we expect in the next few years that brings us closer to this?
This is why I hate those timeline estimates. I think on the regulatory front, that's a big part of it. So up to this point in time, when we look at how easy is it for a cultivated company to scale, we're looking at a very small sample size of companies that have actually achieved regulatory approval in the United States or elsewhere. And so we haven't seen what all of these other companies in the space can do. Companies are going to have shared challenges, but they're also going to have different challenges, and they're going to have very different pathways to getting to scale. So we haven't even seen what most of the companies in this space can do when they're actually scaling up production at that level. So the regulatory is kind of a hurdle we need to get to before we can get to some parts of the technical scale-up challenge. And then I think the other thing is just having bioreactor designs and bioprocesses that are more designed for cultivated meat as opposed to just doing what pharma has been doing. Pharma is a very different industry with very different volumes of margins, and we can't just directly take their equipment and expect it to work. It's going to be way overengineered. So we need equipment that's actually made for cultivated meat. And if you have any questions, please direct them to Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy, for the offer. Okay, let's move on to
Cindy.
Oh yeah, Cindy. Okay. Given the funding environment, what does scale look like for cultivated seafood in the next 5 to 10 years?
That was a great segue, Claire. Thank you. So as I mentioned, one of our biggest challenges is the equipment side of the scale-up problem. I think that over the past couple of years, when the funding was more prolific, that there were cultivated meat companies that were looking to scale up to very large scales with bioreactors on the order of hundreds of thousands of liters, which is very large. It's similar to the scale of these alternative protein fermentations. And since then, there has been a decline in the available funding, and the demand hasn't come along as quickly as anybody expected it to. So we've all been kind of trying to scale back our scale-up expectations. I think that over the next 5 years, at least for cultivated seafood, I think we will see something tenfold less than that, maybe in the tens of thousands of liters of capacity.
I've seen some of Wildtype's products and they look beautiful, indistinguishable from like real salmon. So that's awesome. Hope to see that soon. Okay, Nicki, how fast do you think we'll see price parity for precision fermented proteins? Do you think the same challenges apply? And what kind of products using these proteins can we expect on the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the same challenges do apply, but I think the difference between precision fermentation and cultivated is with precision fermentation, you know, unless you're scooping whey protein into your mouth, you're not eating a whole protein product. So I can give you an example of ice cream, which was one of Perfect Day's first products they launched. And they chose to make ice cream because it's delicious and it's nostalgic and all of these good ways to introduce a novel food to the consumer. But also you only need a little bit of protein in the product. It's not like a milk, right, where protein is a much larger proportion of it. And so it just gave Perfect Day a better lever to pull the price down and to make it a little bit more reasonable as an entryway to the consumer. And so there's considerations to think about whether you want to try and sell it premiumness, to try and drive, you know, more novelty for the technology. And Perfect Day really tried both approaches with a at parity brand that was priced the same as Ben & Jerry's, and then high-end brands launched with B2B customers. And so I think even with that, I think the challenge of scale, being able to make enough, and then also driving demand, right, are really sort of what we're seeing now. And, you know, as Christie said, the adoption curve is steep. It's steeper than everyone thought. And it's just going to take a little bit longer. And I think familiarity and accessibility are such a big part of that. And so I think what it's really going to take is to have more products like these, plant-based, cultivated, precision fermentation, in more places and spaces and formats, right? So that whatever your need is, there's an option for you to try it. Right now, it's so hard to find.
Absolutely. I want to move on to Ash. So Ash, from our conversation, you mentioned that price isn't the only thing your consumers care about. So what does your target consumer look like, and what kind of strategies are you employing to reach new customers?
Yeah, totally unplanned segue, but need states. We think a lot at Ojaswe about need states because we have an easier time in that, unlike precision fermented products or unlike plant-based meat alternatives, we're doing a portion of education around, hey, this is a new flavor to you, or maybe you haven't tried millet before, so this is a new type of flour for you. But the end format, we are selling something slightly different, isn't we? We're selling the novelty or the taste profile. So for us, we found that our target shoppers, they're not necessarily walking into a store saying, what is the cheapest product we can buy? Now, yes, in an ideal world, regeneratively sourced products are both affordable and widely available, and also compensating farmers. But right now, well, for Ojaswe and a lot of other regeneratively focused brands, premium priced products are where we found more of a niche and a willingness not just to try something new, but to pay a little bit more. They're more than the average product in a retail store is what I mean. And for us, when I talk about need states, it is our consumers are often busy professionals. They're looking to add more plants into their diet. They're looking to feed their children. Children are a big one for us. We don't directly market our products to kids, but through our farmers markets and pop-ups and wherever we've seen and fed customers, I find that if there is a kid in tow and the kid tastes the product, it's a sure sell. Like, there is no two ways about it. That parent is buying that product. So I think children tend to be both honest and very picky. I think the answer for us has been using that familiar format of either a pancake mix or a waffle or something of that nature. The format stays familiar, but we're meeting our customers' needs in terms of clean label, in terms of being nutrient dense, in terms of delivering not just protein, but a bunch of other nutrients and fiber that just so happen to be on trend, but are at any given point in time pretty easy to say, hey, this is good for you, eat it.
Those are some really good strategies, Ash. Okay, Christie. So, representing the plant-based world in general, right? Given the current state of funding for alternate proteins, what steps should be taken to allow for plant-based meats to capture a larger percentage of the market share?
So it's easy to say that the reason that plant-based meat went some highs and lows is because of consumer sentiment, and that is probably true to some degree. But the truth of the matter is The consumption of protein in the United States of America is about one thing. It is about the cost of protein. And until you bring the cost down, it's simply not going to be a mainstream product. Meat is the second largest category of food in the United States, only second to corn, which actually feeds the meat industry, which means that when consumers in the United States, which is mostly in say, North America and South America, one of the largest consumers of meat in the world, when they choose to eat, they are choosing to eat protein and they're choosing to eat meat. Until you hit the price parity, it isn't truly a mainstream product. And that's why we spend so much time focusing on not just quality, not just volume, not just taste and texture, but we take a limited number of those products and we hyper-focus on price parity, because it is all about economics. And it's easy to pretend that, oh, well, I didn't like this product. Well, how many chicken nuggets have you tried in the last, 35, 40 days, and you didn't like one or two of them? The same is true for plant-based. So I think that we hyper-focus on this consumer sentiment because it's easy to understand, it's easy for the media to cover it. Protein in America is all about price.
Maybe even worldwide.
Yeah.
You've sold me on this vision. I really want to help. And I think a lot of people in the audience too might want to get involved. So I want to segue to the next section, which is, let me ground the audience. So from how we vote to the choices we make as consumers, our individual actions ripple outward. We actually have more power to shape the future than we realize. So now that we're all protein enthusiasts, how can we support what you do and get involved? Whether it's a career transition, learning something new, or donating to nonprofits in the field, what are ways to help the field advance? And everyone can go on this one. Let's start with this.
Well, personally, we have a couple of positions that we're hiring for, so check out our website. We're in desperate need for a sales and financial assistant, so please check that out, or just email me directly if you're interested. I swear to God, I got up at 4 o'clock this morning for the last 5 days just to be at the factory this morning and then here tonight, so we definitely need help. Second of all, absolutely the choices we make, the choices our school food directors make, the choices our cafeterias make, what we decide to offer really matters. And you want to call it humane food, climate-friendly food. Asking makes a big difference as a consumer. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest impacts. And then if you do want to be in this field, happy to chat with you about it, but more than anything else, there's nothing better than trying. Joining a startup, joining an alternative protein company, joining a company that has an alternative protein or alternative plant-based thread to it, or alternative, fermentation or cultivated, which I strongly believe are the future of our entire industry. I'm not just a plant-based advocate, I absolutely do believe in cultivated meat as one of the mainstream solutions long-term.
I love thinking about food as climate action because it's the simplest way that everyone can get involved, right? Because I think there can be a lot of anxiety and a lot of guilt around, oh my God, I'm doing all these things that are negatively contributing to the world. Food is a place where you can exercise choice, and it doesn't have to be every meal, it doesn't have to be every single piece of food you put in your mouth, because that is almost impossible to do in our existing food system. But as consumers, I think we can all make one different choice. Try a plant-based meat, try a precision fermented product, try something new and different that brings something new onto your plate. The second thing is support our work, support regional brands, support the food that you care about. Go to a farmer's market. As an ex-farmer, recovering academic and brand manager, I will say please go to a farmer's market and support your local farmers. And then selfishly, for Ojaswe, try our products, leave us a review. We also cook for the community, so if you want us to cook a meal for you, send me a note.
Ooh.
All right, I feel like this is a hard one to answer just because it just depends so much on who you are and where you're coming from and what level of involvement you're interested in. Obviously, if you come from a technical background or you're a student and you're trying to figure out which direction you're going to go, we absolutely are going to need talented people in technical roles throughout this field, especially as alternative proteins scale up. So that's a huge thing. What that looks like can be very different for different people. I mentioned technical roles, but we also need people in business, marketing, all those sorts of things. We need chefs to make products accessible and kind of figure out that bridge between this like weird science food stuff we're doing and like, hey, this is actually food that you want to have on your plate. Chefs are super important. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. I think I'm probably also supposed to say that we accept donations. There's a button on our website. I feel weird saying that, but our development team would get mad at me if I didn't. So, and not just us, but New Harvest. There are other nonprofits doing really good stuff in this space as well, who definitely deserve support.
We've listed a few nonprofits on the whiteboard over here, so take a picture later if you want. And if you have the means to donate, please do consider that.
I'm going to take a little bit different angle. I started out my introduction saying I'm a chemical engineer, so I'm an advocate for the sciences. We need scientists. We need scientists and engineers, but we have all the other disciplines that Clara mentioned at Wildtype Foods. Even though we're a company of less than 100 people, we have food scientists and chefs and all of that as well. But if you're really interested in getting involved, I would strongly recommend, if you're not a scientist, educating yourself about the science and understand how these products are produced, what goes to feeding the cultivated meat cells, what goes into the precision fermentation, what goes into the plant-based foods, so that you can understand and recognize where the truth lies. There have been states, particularly in the Deep South, that have been legislating against cultivated meat recently. So, you know, I just would really recommend understanding the science so you can filter the facts and decide for yourself where the truth lies.
I mean, I echo a lot of what's been said, but I think sometimes we discount how important our individual voices are. You know, looking at all of the research about where people want to get information about food and nutrition, the most highly valued source is friends and family, right? So I think really making sure that you're eating with your values and that you're also helping other people understand what those are, right? Because whether it's trying to get these products into a supermarket, trying to get funding from an investor, trying to get a large corporation to use these ingredients in their own products, the pitch has always been consumers care about sustainability and they want to eat less meat. But if you look at the data, it's just not true actually, right? So we really have to change that. So I think it's using our voices to change those numbers and really just create some tailwinds.
Wow, so a lot of this conversation has been focused on there isn't too much funding in the industry. Maybe consumers don't even care about what we care about here, climate and ethics or whatever, right? So it seems a little sad, but I want to end on a note of optimism before we take questions. So I want to start from you, Nicki, and maybe we'll have a lightning round of just answer. Let's end on a hopeful note in one sentence. What are you most excited or optimistic about in the next 5 years for alternative proteins? Yeah.
I mean, I think all of the voices in this room, but I actually am optimistic about the funding climate. I think, you know, the pendulum was swung so far where money was pouring into space. There was no accountability. And I think as dollars start to flow again, I think companies are going to be making better products that are more targeted to consumer. And I think we'll really start to see traction that is going to be more sustainable.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing that I'm the most excited about our process at Wildtype is the declining salmon populations. I haven't mentioned yet. The salmon fishing in California has been banned for this is the 3rd year in a row because the population is declining so rapidly, and we've actually had seafood companies reach out to us saying, when is your product coming available? So I guess that's the thing that I'm the most excited about.
I would say one thing that gives me a lot of optimism is students. So I still remember an email I got in like 2020 from a master's student at the time who was like, oh, I have an idea for a project. I want to apply to the research grants program. And I replied and was like, okay, we'll see what happens. And then her proposal ended up being really good. And she got this professor on board who is, now one of our superstar past grantees and is like directly responsible for the Feasts program, which is like a consortium of like 30 different organizations that got a huge amount of funding from Horizon Europe last year or so. And it's like, there are so many stories like that one, like just rock star professors in this field who you hear their names and like, oh yeah, this person is like the George Clooney of cultivated meat. And like, I stole that from someone recently. I won't tell you who she was talking about. But just like so many of these people who are amazing, and why are they in this field? Because some student came up to them and was like, I have a weird project. Can I like have a corner of a bench in your lab? And that is literally the reason that they're here. So I'm definitely prone to cynicism, but every time I interact with students, I'm like, oh, okay, we're good.
Tough acts to follow. I think for me it's a little bit different. I'm very excited about farmers, younger farmers specifically. There is as some of you may know, there's a huge crisis of where farms are going, where farmland is growing, and who inherits that farmland. So every time because a lot of farmers are aging out. Long story short, there's not enough farmers to go in and cultivate the land because it's hard work, it's grueling work, and it's often not profitable. But I'm very excited by seeing these smaller holding farms, even in North America, that are doing the same thing, right? Hey, I want 3 acres on your land to try out a weird product in regeneration. That's a phenomenal way, I think, to convince the old timers in their circles on how regeneration can still work, how it can be more profitable. So that talking to my farmers always gives me so much energy, and it's the thing I'm most excited to see grow.
I'm really excited to see a trend that we've been seeing with our customers who are all almost all of them are school districts, which are school districts replacing 100% of their processed chicken products with our products. This is probably, I think we have 5 of them right now in here out of the 350 school districts across the country that we serve, over 7,000 schools. But it's just so exciting to see that these, processed meats were declared a class 1 carcinogen in 2015 by the World Health Organization. Getting it out of public schools is not just a health issue, a climate issue, but it's a public health issue. So I'm really proud of the schools that have taken that step and find that plant-based processed chicken products, where and when they need to use them, are the right solution to replacing meat on a large scale.
That's amazing. With that, we'll conclude our panel. You guys can relax, no more time constraints. Let's give a round of applause for our amazing panel.